we also are serving a lot more individuals with the most significant disabilities. And for them in particular, customized employment is an excellent avenue to try to really come at this in a different angle so that we can help them to achieve their goals and to break into that labor market in a way that, again, traditional vocational rehabilitation methods haven't quite been able to do. You know, when you first start doing that, a new model, it takes longer. And I think the long-term vision is we get better at doing this model and we build more structure and support around this model. I think it's going to become easier for us. I think we've been aware that this is a significant change that we're trying to implement. The most important accomplishments this past year has been seeing how communities have come together to solve problems and to exact change. So a lot of the individuals that we work with right now are really competing with individuals that are maybe more qualified or have more experience than they do. And so we are struggling, like many people in our communities, to help them find jobs. We're hoping that this customized employment can do. What we're finding is that some of our traditional methods of providing service to them are not working. We've seen this past year through this project that several individuals that we've had in the demonstration sites who have been getting services in the traditional way for a very long time. We've moved into this model of service delivery, and we've really been able to achieve better results for them. The program can do is provide another model of service that probably in this labor market and this economic environment is more important than ever for us to get out and available to individuals and to really kind of work this model in a way that helps people really truly identify their gifts. We're trying to give people a career that they can feel excited about, that they can be engaged in, and that at the end of the day, that results in better success. To me, what's most important is that people with disabilities who are being served in these programs are saying that that they're excited about this model. And I think that's something that we have to pay attention to in terms of the satisfaction that people that we're serving have.
So what I see with a lot of the aspects of customized supported self-employment, and again, the discovery is particular as an assessment tool, is it's more, it's a buzzword today to say organic, but it's more natural to how everybody goes through kind of a progression to get to where they're at. So I think as a system, we're kind of moving forward, we're moving from that very linear process, step by step, to trying to incorporate more treating an individual who has a disability, who wants to increase their independence and go to work, more just like the rest of us go through that process in life. And so that's, to me, figuring out how to do that while working in the fact that you're still a government entity that still has certain process-oriented features built in is, I think, the challenge, but also what's exciting to me. Our old process did not work very well for a lot of individuals with disabilities. I mean, we have data to show that. I intuitively know that from having been a counselor in this organization and having, sat next to people and really struggled from the counselor perspective on, I want to work with this individual. I want to see them have success with their goals, but our process doesn't work for them very well. No assessment is going to get me what I need. Doing the actual self-employment piece, I don't think that's necessarily something every one of our consumers would want to do or even benefit from. But I think that it will show that there's a palette of there's a way of approaching the work that is effective. And I think what we need to do as an organization is to figure out, how to measure that success so that we're not just, saying, well, we believe it's effective or we believe it's a good idea or philosophically it sounds really good, but we can actually show, here's an individual, process-wise, we were stuck, and here's how the model actually produced success with them. one process doesn't work for every individual, and somehow we try that with individuals with disabilities and say, well, clearly there's issues, to getting an individual with a disability a job, when really what we've done is taken them and put them through an artificial process. It doesn't work, and then we draw a conclusion that it must be because they just don't fit. I think we need to think more as a program about what it looks like just for John Q. Public to start from their transition age. And so I think we need to look more at, as a system, what does it look like for a very natural progression, which isn't clean, it's not linear, it's not, very cookie cutter, and then how do we figure out how to make our system apply that to individuals with disabilities? And I think we'll find that some of the roadblocks we think are there actually aren't nearly as big a deal. Our old process did not work very well for a lot of individuals with disabilities. I mean, we have data to show that. I intuitively know that from having been a counselor in this organization and having, sat next to people and really struggled from the counselor perspective on, I want to work with this individual. I want to see them have success with their goals, but our process doesn't work for them very well. No assessment is going to get me what I need.
It tends to open the door to even the thinking about self-employment. A fair number of people with very complex disabilities, self-employment's generally not even an option on the table. So the introduction of in this project, and the results have been pretty significant in that area, that people who almost wouldn't possibly have been served in the past in any kind of self-employment arena. A large number of the outcomes that are coming out of the project already are self-employment outcomes. I think that'll level off in the future. That notion that 20% of the population generally is owning a small business in this country. But people with disabilities, if you look at the state data collection from Rehab Services Administration at the federal level, the average percentage of people with disabilities starting small businesses in state VR systems that are sponsored is more like 1.7%. So the logical conclusion could be, well, if 20% of the population would normally start a business, why wouldn't 20% of people with disabilities be starting businesses, and why is it kind of suppressed to 1.7%? So the excitement for me for this entire project, and for the other projects we're working with in Texas and Florida at the state level of VR systems change, is to be at these moments in time and to be participating in a project like this when self-employment is actually offered, or even considered. Whether it becomes the outcome or not, to me, is part of the whole discovery process, but the fact that someone could imagine that, or their family or parents or spouse or whatever, that this is something possible in my life, that and I certainly applaud Ohio RSC and the leadership here and all the vision that kind of took us to, we're one of the players in this game at this point, but the idea that we were, in a sense, honored to be part of a systems change where counselors and vendors in the street are working day in and day out and using these processes, but also to me, just the phenomenal notion that self-employment is seriously considered and seriously developed, and it's not just a trite, oh, you wouldn't want to own a business. It's more a whole team of people working, saying, how could we put this together in a way that worked for you? The approach that we developed, and we've worked in 2 other states in this similar approaches, working with the state of Florida, all of their vocational rehabilitation vendors in the state, and then in the state of Texas with Texas Vocational Rehabilitation and, again, their vendors. So we had some experience in doing large level, state level changes for entire vocational rehabilitation systems and learned from those. And one is pretty intensive upfront, what we were calling immersion training for counselors, to go training provided around 550 counselors in probably the first 4 months to 5 months of the project. And there's some logistical problems of doing that. So there was certainly a huge amount of cooperation and investment from RSC. The leadership was invested, and so is, in getting this moving in that direction. Demonstration sites to start demonstrating it, and a number of different pieces of the puzzle there. We're bringing together liaison counselors from RSC, and thanks to the leadership of Susan and Dan and Director Miller, and the whole package was put together in a way that would address both the demonstration sites and all of the counselors in the state, but focusing initially on the counselors that would be involved in the demonstration sites. And the notion behind that was to have at least 5 or 6 months of learning what works and what wasn't working at the demonstration sites before we began training the rest of the vendors interested in training in the state, and then rolling out that level of training to all the potential vendors that signed up for additional training to be part of the projects. A significant number of the vendors in the states have been trained. We're still collecting all the data and just finished 2 additional trainings recently. So piece of the puzzle, and customized employment was kind of bred out of the workforce investment initiative, work that we've done on supported employment since supported employment started back in the 80s, and taking kind of the best components of supported employment and adding to it, I guess, in a sense, a little more in-depth piece of the puzzle around discovery, social capital building, understanding how to work in communities. But basically, it's a notion of believing in the person that you're working with. That there's this kind of almost presumed notion that there's not really such a thing as an unsuccessful closure, or that all people have capacities and abilities and interests and that work in the community. But to work with it, it takes the premise of knowing the person to a level that it probably always should have been in the world, in the sense of spending the extra time you need to know the person in their own community. It's an ecological fit more than a predictive validity. So a fair number of people in the world try to look for predictive validity, where you'd be assigned a test of some sort. And if you scored in different ways on the test, they might say you're good at math, so you ought to be an engineer or something. And it's not designed to be that approach at all. It's designed to be ecologically valid in the sense of getting to know the person in their home, in their community, and presuming all along that employment is just a natural part of the community. But also, I think customized employment has this bigger notion involved in it, which is it's trying to get to the heart of if you can solve for the loneliness of people with disabilities, which I think is the issue that people struggle with the most, that are living in poverty, and people that receive Social Security checks and SSI are certainly below poverty level. And if you can solve for the loneliness of people with disabilities, and often the staff that serve them in direct service, employment is a natural outcome of that. And if you listen to people and take the time to, instead of make an early judgment about who this person is, and not administer 17 tests to figure out who you are and all the various information, but to actually listen to who the person is, get to know the person, and using a process of what we're calling discovering personal genius. A lot of folks call it discovery. But the idea of a structured approach that will lead you to almost like the name, a discovered outcome that you wouldn't have actually imagined when you first started working with the person. So, and from that point, discovery is probably key in the sense that if you take a look at the U.S. Department of Labor's use of customized employment across the country and all their demonstration projects, there are some people that would, I would say all people could benefit from discovery as a process, but may not need long-term supported employment supports or something. So discovery could be worked, and then a more traditional employment job search or something. And then there's people that could benefit from customized employment discovery processes and supported employment long-term supports. And then the other piece that weaves into this is self-employment as an option, and microenterprise for people with probably what most folks might call the most complex disabilities that you might not imagine could own a business. And it reframes business ownership into maybe just a different way of getting paid. It tends to opened the door to even the thinking about self-employment. A fair number of people with very complex disabilities, self-employment's generally not even an option on the table. So the introduction of in this project, and the results have been pretty significant in that area, that people who almost wouldn't possibly have been served in the past in any kind of self-employment arena. A large number of the outcomes that are coming out of the project already are self-employment outcomes. I think that'll level off in the future.
But part of discovery says, well, where do people spend time? We want to, as well as going to people's homes, we want to know, what's your week look like? And what do you do? Because in that is social capital. The idea most people get jobs through networking. Discovery. When I say discovery works, even when we want to make it not work, it forces you to, like we said, to go to where people want to be. Prior to about 5 years ago, when I learned about customized employment, something always seemed wrong to me. The process of spending a few moments with somebody who has very little life experience, almost no work experience, and deciding then and there, maybe through looking in the newspaper or want ads and deciding what work goal they may have, without really getting to know them. There was always some hint that something wasn't right here. And customized employment is fundamentally different than typical, or Mike Callahan says traditional is a loaded word, but typical. The approach is almost everybody's taking, in that it starts with the person. Really, I think when you boil down why things aren't going so well with folks with disabilities, I think it's primarily because they aren't known, as human beings. They aren't known all the complexities, all the strengths, interests, talents, to use the discovery language. It's not customized. You use Carrie's language. It ain't customized if you've gone through the usual processes. If you're doing resumes, they aren't just formalities or just perfunctory. If you're putting in applications, if you're doing traditional interviewing, if you're doing that, it's not customized. The idea behind customized and using the discovery process is you're getting to know the person within their, what we call ecological validity, their environment, the environment that makes sense to them. And you're getting to know, where they live, who their supports are, how they engage in the community. I feel like these tools are just so powerful. They're so universal that even when we fumble around and try to screw them up, that they'll, if we just put ourselves in proximity with the community, the community is going to help us figure this out. But part of discovery says, well, where do people spend time? We want to, as well as going to people's homes, we want to know, what's your week look like? And what do you do? Because in that is social capital. The idea most people get jobs through networking. Discovery. When I say discovery works, even when we want to make it not work, it forces you to, like we said, to go to where people want to be.
The thing with discovery is we're trying to, we talk about discovering somebody's personal genius. We're trying to discover who the person is. And what we find a lot of times is people have an interest. So maybe people have 3 different interests. And sometimes these are pretty non-traditional interests than what we've dealt with before. But you don't have a theme until you take an interest and match it with some skills. So an interest in an interest, and you don't have a theme until somebody has some interest, and you go out and you do some informational interviews, or you do something and you find out, well, wait a minute, this person has a skill here. If you go out and find an entrepreneur and you bring somebody in with some skills that match, and you bring somebody in that maybe some skills and some equipment that helps a small employer generate enough revenue to have another set of hands around, it works. The thing with discovery is we're trying to, we talk about discovering somebody's personal genius. We're trying to discover who the person is. And what we find a lot of times is people have an interest. So maybe people have 3 different interests. And sometimes these are pretty non-traditional interests than what we've dealt with before. But you don't have a theme until you take an interest and match it with some skills. So an interest in an interest, and you don't have a theme until somebody has some interest, and you go out and you do some informational interviews, or you do something and you find out, well, wait a minute, this person has a skill here.
But we still want to say, what if you put all your eggs in one basket and that doesn't come about? So let's just think of a couple of other areas to fall back on, because we don't want to have to come back to this point again and start all over. So introducing the concept of discovery and the 3 vocational themes right at the very beginning, and explain why and give examples to individuals and their families as they're making this choice for customized employment, I think helps people know that you're not going to discard their interests. You're not going to just say, we're not going to follow that, but you're going to say, we're not going to just do one thing, but let's do several things in case this doesn't work out. I think that customized employment is not about asking questions and coming up with vocational themes based on an answer to a question or just a simple interest. It's about observing and watching and the individual with a disability doing things and observing and watching them to learn what their skills and talents are. When somebody has such a very strong interest, I guess that not just an interest, but a strong interest coupled with really good concrete skills and experience, we really do need to acknowledge that person as one of their strong vocational themes. But we still want to say, what if you put all your eggs in one basket and that doesn't come about? So let's just think of a couple of other areas to fall back on, because we don't want to have to come back to this point again and start all over. So introducing the concept of discovery and the 3 vocational themes right at the very beginning, and explain why and give examples to individuals and their families as they're making this choice for customized employment, I think helps people know that you're not going to discard their interests. You're not going to just say, we're not going to follow that, but you're going to say, we're not going to just do one thing, but let's do several things in case this doesn't work out. I think, as Carrie Griffin has said, that it can kill you if you only have one idea. You got to have more than one idea. And so for some people it's very clear, and for other people sometimes the idea is something that they have been introduced to, and it may not really be a clear choice. It's just by lack of experience. People have a particular interest. So it behooves all of us to try to explore a lot of different ways in which an individual's interests and talents and skills and tasks that they can complete can help us enter lots of different businesses to explore relationships and possibilities of contribution. We also found people that were struggling a lot with their current caseloads and how they currently deliver services. So they're a vocational service provider, and they wear multiple hats. They they provide assessments to people in community-based assessments. So they oversee a caseload of sometimes 15 to 20 people who are involved in a community-based assessment. They're responsible for job development for those same 15 to 20 people. They are also involved in doing backup for their coworkers. And then we come in with this idea of customized employment that's very time-intensive, and we only work with a few people at a time. And the complexity of juggling those two worlds. How can you keep one foot in the traditional service model and then put another foot in customized employment model that's very time intensive and consumer specific, really has challenged the direct service people, but also their supervisors. We have people who have a certain way that they've been doing business for a while. I think for some people it's hard to let go of those traditional practices. We keep trying to inform people and trying to give the stories about how this works for people with the most severe disabilities, because our traditional models have often failed those people. Looking at when we do the traditional models of going out and talking to businesses within a particular job goal, and then coming back with an opening, and then looking to your list or your pool of 15 to 20 applicants, and we typically will go to the best qualified to meet that employer's needs. And that person who has the more significant challenges or the least amount of skills, who matches that job the least, gets left behind. And that happens over and over again for that person who has the most challenges and skills deficits, or who have more significant disabilities. And so those are the people we're talking about that customized employment is so necessary for.
My work on the project has mostly been about trying to help people think more deeply about what we tend to call social capital, but I tend to think about in terms of relationship building and the necessity for that. People with disabilities find themselves very often, at least people with significant disabilities, find themselves isolated, from the culture. They find themselves alone if we're not careful. And so building relationships of any kind is terribly important. The families of people with disabilities no longer seem to me to be too interested in being satisfied with the faucet stems in the basement of the school. They haven't been satisfied with that for a long time. They're looking for stuff that makes sense for their daughter, their son, their grandson, nephew, whoever it happens to be, and they're